thank you very much. I'm going to keep my intro short and sweet because I just think that that's really important, especially in the world today. I'm Misty. I'm an SDA board member. SDA stands for Shakopee Diversity Alliance. As the SDA, I just want to recognize that the land we are on was stolen from our Indigenous brothers and sisters. I want to recognize that we see you, we hear you, and really just want to show appreciation for you showing up for the Black community, especially during this trial and all the things that have happened over the last year, plus the 400 years before that. Also would like to take a moment to pause to just stand in solidarity with our Asian brothers and sisters who have experienced a horrible hate crime in the last couple of weeks and just to recognize their loss. Again, the SDA is here. We see you, we hear you. We want to offer our condolences and support. With that said, I just want to recognize the importance of this event. This event is to find ways for us all to work together to understand how to support people of color and people of cultures, whichever words you prefer, through education and resources. At the end, I will offer a special thanks to the Scott County Library as they will have resources available as well to follow up if you want further education. The SDA is a nonprofit organization located in Shakopee. During the pandemic, we've really focused on helping people in need. We've helped people who have been tagged with hate crimes. We are a donation-based organization, so of course the plug to donate if you feel called to. I want to go ahead and introduce Joli to give her as much time to speak as possible. This is Joli. She has been gracious enough to come alongside of us and help us and really support whatever the SDA is needed and to support me personally. Joli, thank you for all your love and support. I really appreciate that, and especially your new friendship. So thank you for that. I just want to point out that she has been in this allyship or on this allyship journey for 30 years, which is amazing. And she has this amazing quote, which I think I will let her share. So take it away, Joli.
Thank you so much, Misty, and thank you very much for the rest of you on the SDA. I have multiple reasons why this is very important and passionate to me for me to be sharing. Before we get into what's going on in that picture there, I just wanted to just share a little bit about myself. I grew up in Duluth, Minnesota, and I raised my children in Duluth, Minnesota, and then I was finally able to get down to Minneapolis, Minnesota 7 years ago. So I really feel like I'm more home in Minnesota, Minneapolis than in Duluth. So there's so much that is really going on in this delivery that I want to share with you in this training and this presentation, or however you want to embrace this. So I will be very quick with some of my professional and volunteer information. I know that it was listed in the announcement. So some of the things I just want to share with my home life and my work life is now finally connected with one another. At work, I am on the Inclusion and Diversity Committee, which I conduct unconscious bias trainings with our employees. I am also part of the Cultural Awareness Committee, where I am the presenter for Jewish holiday celebrations and awareness with 10 other people from around the world. And I am also on the Social Responsibility Committee, which, because volunteering and the connection with my community is so very important, it is also very important for me to show and empower and bridge my other employees' ways of getting involved with their community. A neat piece about my employment is that I work on a global level. I work with mostly international contacts and employees from Korea, India, Russia. You can just tell you all across the world. So every day I am in other people's worlds, and I am inviting you into my world now. The reason I have titled this Ally and Learning is because actually you never just learn everything and you're done. You are always learning. And as Misty had said, it's been 30 years of learning that I will share with you in this journey today. And even in the last month, when I knew I was going to be presenting this, things had changed and more information came my way, and I am adding it in, and I'm changing and I'm focusing. So you are always in learning. And so it's very important that you understand that we are learning and we are in allyship and connection to awareness. So one of my favorite workshops that I did take, and I do have a resource document I will be giving to SDA to post out there where some of this information is coming from. I ended up attending a workshop with Doreen Richards he was the Anti-Racism Fight Club. And during that workshop, he made it really clear, and he made a plea out to the white attendees to start doing this work. Himself and the BIPOC community is very exhausted, and he needs the allies to start doing the work. And that is when the light bulb went off to me, and I said, okay, how can I do this? I've been doing this for 30 years. I've been doing it one way or the other, but how can I add more to it? So I am wanting to confirm and let you know that a lot of the presentation here is actually an education towards white population. But with that, I thank any BIPOC community members that have joined us today, that I appreciate your collaboration. And I also want to let you know that some of the discussion may set a trigger, but I want you to know that I'm aware of that, and my heart is thinking throughout this whole presentation that we move ahead with. So the guidelines for my presentation is that I will be using I statements. I do not speak for BIPOC communities. It will all be through myself, my experiences, and what I've learned. And my goal is to compile everything that I have learned, I've read, researched, tripped, and taught myself through these past 30 years. I will be exposing myself and showing that I'm not an expert. I'm not an expert in anything, but I will continue to stumble. And I say the wrong thing, and you will see something out there. I have a screen that I'm going to share of time that I made the wrong communication. But what I'm also wanting people to know is that don't get discouraged. When you see the date and you see that it's 2021, you'll understand I didn't get discouraged from it. This discussion is not meant to be comfortable. So if you feel uncomfortable, then this is the right direction. And there's nothing comfortable about racism. So that is my guidelines that I ask of you to think about when we go through this journey together. And of course, I bet you're all wondering, who is that on the front page? So when I think about myself, and I think about the quote that is on there from Elie Wiesel, he wrote the book Night. He was a Holocaust survivor. He says, there may be times when we are powerless to prevent injustice, but there must never be a time when we fail to protest. So from a very young age, as you can see here, this was 1987 at my graduation, you know, my purse that I wore throughout that whole year was to stop corruption. And from that point, I've been involved in marches to support many different groups, from women supporting women to the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer plus group. And for the community of color within my community, I have been an ally to see everyone. And so where I'm going to take this through is that we're going to walk through a lot of words, a lot of definitions. And my goal is also to give you something to take away from each of those screens about how you can take that next step to allyship. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. And we are going to move on to the first, actually, is what is allyship? So an allyship is authentic. And the first definition here is allyship is the practice of emphasizing social justice, inclusion, and human rights by members of an in-group dominant culture to advance the interests of an oppressed or marginalized outgroup. Allyship is part of the anti-racist conversation, which puts into use of social justice theories or ideals. Or my easier way that I like to put it is an ally is about one's own self-awareness and does the work to learn and understand the constructs of racism and fight for racial justice alongside BIPOC communities, usually privileged to push change forward. So I also have to put this in here because this has been something I've faced, is if you are in the movement in a self-serving manner and only doing this to be seen and heard to receive praise, then you can leave your white savior attitude elsewhere. This allyship is authentic. And it is not only when it is convenient, it is authentic work being aware every day you wake up. And I wake up every day. Every day I wake up and I go, okay, what do I have on my work agenda at work? What do I have after work? Every single day. And then that is doing the work. So let's go ahead and do the work here. So I am really big into data. I like to quantify, and I like to think about trends, and I like to see what's the next step. So I located this active participation. So I'm asking everybody who's joined tonight to think about these different steps and think about where you are. So if you are actually here tonight, I don't think you're denying that racism exists. I'm hoping not. So there is the first step of deny and ignore. Maybe you're here tonight because you recognize, but you don't know what actions to take. So you're here again to learn what type of actions can I take. And maybe you're here because you recognize, and the only action you may know is marching. And marching is actually, even after you learn other ways to be an ally, marching is one of the best ways to be together with communities and to hear the speakers and to feel everything going around you. So even no matter where you're at, marching to me is one of, I've been doing that for decades. Educating self, that's where you're Googling, you're reading books, you're taking the time to attend this presentation, you are finding workshops out on the web, and you're really learning to educate. Educating others when it gets to that point when you can start having that conversation with other people and to show and to teach and to and explain what is as allyship, what is systemic racism. Then there's that support and encourage, where you support that. You support the BIPOC community, where you're in your place, you have opportunities within your workplace where you can make sure when policies are being compiled that you're looking at the table, who's at your table. And if you do not see diversity at your table, that you are adding into that policy or into that law that is going to benefit all people, not just white people. Then you get to the initiate and prevent. And I think I'm finally there. I think after 30 years, I think I'm finally at the initiate and prevent. I'm initiating, and I initiated my fear of everything that maybe I know and maybe I don't know, but still putting myself out there to share with others. So think about where you might be on the spectrum right now. And awareness starts here. So we're going to go through some words, and we're going to go, we're going to learn some into depth for the words. So here you see anti-racism is not simply about being against racism. It is active mission to eradicate racism in all forms to ensure BIPOC communities can live in an equal world. It requires people to make a call to action, being uncomfortable and visible, so change is made. And it's another term that's interchanged with allyship. BIPOC is what you've been hearing, which means for Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And that is how I will be using the term throughout our presentation. So we also have racism, a political, economic, or social system in which a dominant race uses its power and influence to oppress others of different races. Systemic racism, also known as institutionalized racism. It's embedded in policies, laws, and applied as normal practice within society or an organization. And it can lead to such issues as discrimination and criminal justice with the police brutality, employment, housing, healthcare, political power, and education. Now here's reverse racism. And I'm hoping everybody out there is thinking, wait a minute, there's no such thing as reverse racism out there. So if you acknowledge that there is no such thing as reverse racism, you can already start this presentation out with an A, because you cannot have reverse racism. BIPOC people cannot be racist because there is no construct in America where they hold power or influence. There can be no reverse racism. So give yourself an A if you already were questioning why that was there. Then we have equality and equity. So equality is defined as treating everyone the same and giving everyone access to the same opportunities, while equity recognizes that each person has different circumstances and allocates the exact resources and opportunities needed to reach an equal outcome. These three words kind of intersect together, which is the third word, intersectionality. And I'm hoping that in the next month or so, I can go a little bit more and we can work a little bit more on this line right here. But on a basic here, we have unconscious bias, which are the attitudes, opinions, and judgments that paint a person or group of people in either a positive or negative light. Now, everyone does actually have biases. And when we get to that page, you'll understand why we all do have biases. And microaggressions are a brief, and they are common in daily verbal, behavioral, or environmental, whether intentional or unintentional, that communicates hostile, derogatory, or negative attitudes towards marginalized people. And then we have this word intersectionality, which has been a big talk lately about how can we embrace the interconnection of all people. So what it is that nature of social categorization such as race and religion and gender and so many more. And you will see more about what characteristics actually fall under your biases, your microaggressions, and your intersectionality. We have hashtag Black Lives Matter. This was actually created by 3 women after the murder of Trayvon Martin, and when George Zimmerman was actually found not guilty. Black Lives Matter is a hashtag, and it's almost like it's become a social justice title for kind of like that new civil rights movement. However, it is not a political agenda. This is a human rights. I don't like to use the word agenda there, but this is a human rights movement that we see Black Lives Matter. I did put in All Lives Matter because I'm sure there has been that discussion out there that, but wait a minute, all lives matter. Well, we can't have all lives matter until we have Black Lives Matter in there also. And what that's saying is that until the systems, until we see our brothers and sisters of BIPOC communities that can get pulled over and be treated just as fairly as white people, as we see the treatment in anywhere with our BIPOC community, that they are safe, they are treated in the systems with fair employment and with healthcare. And we see that we cannot have an All Lives Matter until we have our Black Lives Matter. So please remember, it is about, until inclusion is with everyone, we can't have All Lives Matter. We have the white privilege, which is the term was popularized by Peggy McIntosh in 1988, which reflects whites' historical and contemporary advantages and access to quality education, decent jobs, and livable wages, right along with home ownership, wealth, and where if you are white, you don't have to think about race. You can wake up any morning and you do not have to think about what you're going to see on social media, what you may hear in the news, what you may hear at work, or what you may just hear out in the community. White fragility is the tendency among members of the dominant white culture group to have a defensive, wounded, angry, or dismissive response of evidence of racism. And that's a lot of the times when you talk about reverse racism or All Lives Matter, that's where you see a lot of that white fragility come in there. And then we have white supremacy. So white supremacy encompasses the belief that the white race is inherently superior to other races and that white people should have control of people of other races. It's just what it is, what it is. And we're going to go on to learning a bit more about some of these words much closer with some takeaways about how you can learn to add to your journey as an ally. So when you heard white supremacy, some people think of the groups and kind of more of that ideology of hate groups. So I wanted to show, you know, some of the white supremacists out here. So we have the Unite for Right, which was at Charlottesville in August of 2017, where the neo-Nazis, neo-Confederates, neo-fascists, and the Ku Klux Klan all came together to show that they're white power and show that this is how our country is to be. It was in commemoration also about a lot of the monuments that are being removed. So there is one ideology of a group. And then we also have the Ku Klux Klan. And the reason I put this one in here is because along with my journey, I also like to share some of my steps and processes through this 30 years. This was written by Elizabeth Dorsey Haddle. She is a teacher in Minnesota, actually. And I ended up meeting her in 2010. She was doing, we were working together on a symposium about race in Duluth, and she was in the middle of writing this book. So I did help connect some of the connections of the Ku Klux Klan in the Duluth and up north. And I will throw out there that I am forwarded in this book. So I was very proud of that concept, that I had knowledge and that I was able to work with a teacher that had even more knowledge than me. So there's another piece. And then we also have Hitler over here. I don't have much more to say, but when we do think about a white supremacy, Hitler does come into that picture of being a white supremacist. But I want to show you what more of our white supremacy may look like here. And here you see, this is white supremacy and white privilege at its most discussed. This was January 6th of 2021. And this was the far right group that thought that the election had been stolen from their dictator, Trump. And I'm going to be real transparent. If you didn't see and understand what happened in the past 4 years and read an ideology of a dictator, Trump was leading us into a dictatorship in this country. That is my opinion. And that is what I have viewed with, reading that definition. So what is really, really important here is when we think about it, we think about white supremacy and white privilege. And we think about these people that thought that their country was being taken away, which their country, because of what it was built on and how it was built, that they felt that they were going to take over the Capitol. And they were met with, actually, they were treated quite well for taking over the Capitol. Now, if we know that there was another group, and we've already heard it, if a Black Lives Matter group or a march comes together, we've already seen it. The rubber bullets, we've seen the gas, we've seen the terror that comes from breaking apart marches and groups that are marching. So the privilege there and the white supremacy of taking back their country. Now, when I say taking back their country, that comes with the truth that this country was not built on equality for all. And that's why I have that book in there, that U.S. Constitution for Dummies, which I suggest everybody to read it and to look at it and to really look to see how this country was built, and to see that if you look at it, even start reading the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, that is going to give you great insight of what I'm trying to explain here, because the founding white men had no intention to include slaves or indigenous people in this country, or I would not be standing here and speaking. For 400 years, what we are seeing and what we are still seeing today, if this country was truly built on that concept of equality for all, we would not be talking anymore. And why I say that, and this is just from me again, from my reading, is that the 14th Amendment granted citizenship and equal civil and legal rights to African Americans, as we've seen we've seen that replaced with segregation, Jim Crow laws, and now we're even seeing it in Georgia, where we're seeing the voter restriction laws. It's a continuous way to keep another form of slavery going. And I also say that with our indigenous peoples, because when I was out at Ellis Island in 2019, I actually went to an exhibit and I was shocked. I did not know this, that it wasn't until 1924 that Congress enacted the Indian Citizenship Act, which granted citizenship to all Native American peoples born in the US. I didn't even know that they actually had to go and be granted citizenship, and it was in 1924. So if we all think that this country was built on equality and it was built on for justice for all, it really isn't. And so it really takes your work to start researching through this and start looking, because really this is really where the core is, where we see of what we need to do and make change. And so, I mentioned the monuments, and I'm going to put that out there because I know maybe people are hearing this cancel culture out there. No one is trying to cancel the culture. What we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that everyone can feel safe walking in their communities. Because if you are an indigenous person, you don't want to walk up your steps where there's Christopher Columbus. You don't want to walk in a park where there's a monument of the Confederate of General Lee. And what we want to really do is we want to move those into a museum. It is history, and we need to know what it is about and why it happened, and to move that into a museum. So people who want to see that can go and pay and see that history. And so I only can say from my own experience that if I had to walk anywhere and see statues of Hitler, that is how sick and how much trauma I would experience every time I walked by Hitler. So please understand that what we are seeing in this country is that we are built up on a white supremacy. We have our white privilege, and we have to start looking at how do we make change for how this country was created. So make sure you take away from this part is that your knowledge of history is a very important part in order to do your allyship and to read. And I do think that, because I'm sorry, but I love the Constitution, not because I love it, but I like to read it. And I think it's a very important part to learn and understand how we were built. So let's move forward. So this is where I was saying that I would be sharing with you something that I did in my lifetime, even at the time that I was involved with organizations, involved with my community, and I thought I was so understandable of what racism was. I ended up writing a letter to the editor in 2004 because I was hearing from my daughter's high school that they were going to be changing eligibility to expand to the criteria to see that more students of color were eligible. And this is where my misstep took. I did not understand equality and equity and what that meant. And so I put this letter to the editor out there and concerned about, well, everybody has equality. Everybody has the same access. Everybody can do this. And I did not understand equity. If you see what equity means, you'll see equity is not just giving everybody a box to stand on, because the equity is that not everybody can see what's in front of them. But the equity is to make sure that anybody's needs and to make sure that they can meet to the same side and to the same ends, the end zone is that they can see and they can get there too. So what happened in that is that actually a group of gentlemen from Duluth called the Duluth News Tribune, and they say, listen, I really would like to get in touch with the writer. And so the Duluth News Tribune did call me, and they said they would really like, there's a couple gentlemen that would like to get in touch with you. And so I met with them. They taught me what equity was. I had posed out a very dangerous concept out there that everybody was reading. And I'm sure there were people that were going, yeah, that was dangerous. And I didn't realize what I had done. And on top of that, it took a couple gentlemen of people of color that took the time to educate me. And so again, this is why it is so important to educate yourself, to learn what equality means, to learn what equity means, to take that step, take a step back, read and understand what you're writing. Because this was wrong of me, of my understanding. And this goes down to a lot more about doing the work yourself as an ally. It really is your job to do the work, because it should not be placed on the backs of BIPOC communities. We are now at a time where we have Google, we have every social media, we have books, we have everything at our fingertips. And there are so many more resources out there than there were 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, but we still need to take a step back, and we still need to think about what we are doing and how dangerous it could be to a community. And what I'm presenting to you today is all coming from myself. I have been with workshops and training and reading, and I have been graced with multiple people from the BIPOC community that have also embraced me and have educated me and have showed me different ways and different understandings of the communities. And so 16 years later, I'm still doing this. And that's the next point is that don't get discouraged. 16 years later, I'm still doing this, and I'm showing what mistakes I've made, and I'm owning it. So please remember there's a few points to take away from this, is that remember to not burden our BIPOC community to learn, to make sure that you are taking that step and you are understanding that. And the next step is if you get discouraged, don't stop, because if everybody was to stop at that one discouragement, we're not going to move forward, and I'm not willing to move forward. But I am going to move to the next one. So here we get into our unconscious bias with explicit and implicit bias. This goes along with the next two words that we're going to talk about. So why do we make such rash responses and comments and fast assumptions is because there's this, there is the, I'm sorry, the screen here that I took from in the Israeli economic, and we're going to move into those next pages here, sorry. Daniel Kahneman, who states that 95% of our brain is on intuition and instinct process, and only 5% of our brain is on a rational thinking process. So if we think of the 95% is pulling up history or what we've learned or what we've heard, and if we aren't taking that slow, logical, and decisive thought process, this is where we're getting our unconscious bias delivery. So I show here the explicit and implicit bias, which explicit is actually being very direct, while implicit is a hidden bias. And I showed the two different examples here with, if it's explicit, someone's going to come right out and say, I like whites more than Latinos. While someone who has that implicit or hidden bias is going to say, sitting further away from a Latino than a white individual. They won't say it, they're just going to act and do it. So unconscious bias we can talk about that for a very, very long time, because there's so many different types of biases, and we all do experience biases. And they're all made up with the different characteristics. It's race and religion and gender and sexual orientation and age and body image. So unconscious bias is an element and of all those different types of characteristics, which we're going to look at in the next with the microaggressions here on intent versus impact. So as we know what the microaggressions are, daily verbal, behavioral, or environment, whether intentional or unintentional. But at the same time, they are making the person that is speaking this, they believe that they're being neutral. They believe that their questions could be, a positive, but actually the impact is not a positive. It is building up for BIPOC communities that they may hear one from you, they may hear one from someone else of the day, they may hear another one, and by the end of the day, the community has heard so many. It continues to let you know that you are the other and you are not of the dominant culture. And so when we are thinking about what we are saying, we can go back to the thought process of that 95 versus 5%. Start thinking slow, start stepping back, start thinking about what you're saying. And so a few of these things that I just kind of wanted to point out here shows what I'm thinking. And here's the color blindness here. Statements that indicate that a person does not want to acknowledge race. And so we've always heard, like, when I look at you, I don't see color. So that's the intent, and someone would think that would be good. But actually, that's denying a person's racial ethnic experience. You are denying someone something about themselves. This is my favorite one that I like to hear. America is a melting pot. Well, that is assimilating and acculturating to the dominant culture. So I actually like to call us a salad, because a salad actually has multiple different flavors in the salad. You got tomatoes, or some people put in olives, some people put cucumbers, some people put red peppers or green peppers, and they all have their own flavor. And so when I think about moving past a melting pot, I think of a salad, because every bite I take has a different flavor, a different experience, and that's a different person. So don't put everybody in the same pot and think everybody needs to assimilate to one. Experience the richness of what we all put in together. And that is one of the biggest things that I like to think about when I think about intent versus impact. So what your takeaway on this is to stop and think before you talk. Just really use that 5%. And another ad I'm going to put in there that I learned at one of my microaggressions workshop is to say to yourself, would you ask that question to a white person? Seriously, would you ask that same question to a white person? And if you wouldn't, then you're not going to ask that to anyone else. So it's a good takeaway there is, would I ask that question to a white person? And and stop and think. So if you do say something that does that other person who they receive it actually is going to talk to you about it, or they say, you know, that wasn't nice, or that hurt me, or however it's going to be said. And I understand from interaction that BIPOC communities don't even acknowledge, they move on to the next. But I do want to point out that through anything that when you're having a discussion or a conversation or you say something, to remember it isn't about you or your comfort at that point. And this is from Dwayne Richard. He likes his acronym of ALLY, where he says, apologize. This is the first step. Don't try to explain anything, make excuses for your words or actions. You own it. You apologize and you own it. Listen. Sit back and listen to what you said and did. It's not your time to talk. It is absolutely not your time to talk. Learn. Repeat what you learned. And one thing that I have done in my journey is I actually do keep a journal. I keep a journal of my experiences and interactions, and then I can go back and remind me, and I learn from it. So repeat what you learn, put it in a journal. And then why? Yield. This is a sign that you need to slow down. Again, go back to that 5% of our brain. Maybe we can shift that 95 part to 5% and maybe go 50-50. But one or the other, we need to start thinking more. We need to take a step back. So intersectionality, this one, I've had a lot of experience with the intersectionality, but it is really actually kind of new out there. It was actually, the word was created in 1989 by the professor Kimberly Crenshaw. And so I was not really aware of what intersectionality meant, but I've been in positions of learning about it. And this is back in the early 90s when I first started to learn that we all are made differently and all of us are special with what we bring to the table. And it goes back to when I was a legal advocate with the Women's Coalition in the early 90s. From my experiences with interest with the US Constitution, I actually was in school for criminal justice and poli-sci. So part of my work that I found was working as a legal advocate with the Women's Coalition in Duluth, Minnesota. I was on the criminal side. Part of my job, my role was to attend jail visits if a woman was actually arrested for a domestic assault, which does happen. There were a lot of double assaults and double arrests if they could find aggression on both. So here I am. I'm out of high school, I'm in college, I'm thinking I'm getting into this, I'm a woman, I'm going to help other women, we're going to learn tools, we're going to empower each other. What else do you want? What else do we need? Well, I learned in an experience when I went to do a jail visit. And the woman who I ended up working with was an Indigenous woman. So when they did bring her to the room to discuss what was going to happen in arraignment court, I definitely immediately felt her mistrust with me. And at first I thought, oh, I just want to, we're women. I just want to be and help and be there with you. And then it dawned on me, and this is where intersectionality comes in. It dawned on me because I was a white woman. I was not an Indigenous woman. So I took a step back and I said to her, I am so sorry. I said, I want us to be able to work together through this, but I understand that maybe you'd be more comfortable if I reached out to a resource at the Center for American Indian Resources. And she picked up her ears and she looked at me and she started proceeding towards the table. And I said to her, I can't get in touch with them right now. At that time, there were no phones. We didn't have phones. Oh, there were the big bag phones, but there weren't a phone. And she sat down. I said, but what I can do with you today is we can go to the arraignment court together and I can guide us through that steps and I can be there and see that if we need to do anything to help with your children, housing or anything like that, I can help work with you on that. And she agreed to go with me. And so, we went through the process. I connected her with a resource from the Center for American Indian Resource. And then it really dawned on me, I may be a woman, but there are many different, there's the diversity to each woman and man. And so this is where that intersectionality comes. So there was an activity that we did with our intersectionality workshop where they just said, 3 identities you're on your list. So you can kind of see the middle part has your race, your age, your gender identity, your expression, your gender, etc. And I picked, I really identify as a woman, and I'm white, and then as I'm Jewish. And so the next question was, does your top choice carry privilege? Absolutely. So I'm white. And can people easily identify your top 3? Well, they can identify easily that I'm a woman, I'm white, but they can't identify easily that I'm Jewish. So if we want to embrace every person, there's so much to learn about each other. And so we cannot just assume from what we see is what that person needs or wants. And so the other piece I like to add into this is the golden rule, which is actually not really actually very good anymore when we think about the golden rule. That golden rule is do unto others as you'd want others to do unto you. Well, we are all different. We have all different needs, wants, and so of course we have to think about that. And that is where intersectionality comes in, is that we need to think about how do we look at the whole person and what comes with that whole person. And an example that I've had discussions with is with a person who is a Black, transgender, and maybe a family member. And we can't just look at how do we meet the needs or work together with someone just on the race, but we also have to understand, how do we understand someone's, what's transgender? And then we also have family. There are multiple layers when we think of intersectionality. And what our goal is to get to is to look at the person as a whole individual and not just one part or other parts. And then the takeaway for all of this piece goes to is that we all have different layers, but we also remember the question number 2, does your top choice carry privilege? So I am a white woman and I am Jewish, but I also still have that privilege. I am white. So we need to think about who we are interacting, who is our audience, and how can we work together by embracing each other and working together. So this is one of my favorite parts right here, and I just realized what time it was, so we're going to have to move really quick, and I'm really sorry here. Raising anti-racist children. I think it's very, very important that we start looking at how we raise our children, and starting from a very young age. So what I have here is some ideas, is introduce them to diversity early, read books that initiate the discussion of race. So bring that discussion of race and do it with, age appropriate. You'll know your child, you'll know what would be a good idea. I put in there the story of Ruby Bridges, because Ruby Bridges is one a good way to start, but there's so many other books that you can find in the bookstore. I also have some books that I will show that are in the corner there. This is actually when I was 13, and I actually was awakened to racism at 13 with reading these books. But depending on the age. So my mother, she had a book in her bookshelf, and at the age of 13, I went, ooh, I said, Mom, you have a book in the bookshelf, and it says They Was Just, and it had the N-word. I'm like, that is not a good book. And she says, well, I want you to read it. And I did read it, and it actually woke me up to the structural and systemic racism. It was about the lynchings in Duluth, Minnesota. And I ended up becoming very close to that whole history of it. It directed me into being interested actually in the 14th Amendment and the due process. And it also, in 2000, Duluth ended up creating a memorial, the Clayton Jackson McGee Memorial, that I did end up becoming a board member and a co-chair on in the city of Duluth. And there is an amazing memorial that we have created that was created in Duluth. And that is actually what woke me up to what racism was. And I have been working with my spirit guides of Clayton Jackson and McGee, the 3 men, and they have been a big part of me each step of the way. So, different books. I was a little older. We didn't talk race back in the 70s or 80s. So I was older, but I think it's really important we start when the children are young. Leave your bubble, travel to other cities to explore diversity, museum, parks, and celebrations. My kids always, unfortunately, their trips also included some education on something about the land, something about the people, something about the culture. So that was something that was very important. Be on top of their online content. Social media can be a hotbed of racist activities. make sure that your children are either, one, not being bullied, or are they being the bullies, and have a conversation from that. Open your inner circle. Who is in your network? Who do you have that are around your children? And my children have been with very diverse communities. My daughter's very good friend is Indigenous, and her parents are very involved with the community. We have been invited to powwows, and we've been able to observe powwows and to join in the celebrations. And that has been a really beautiful piece to add into some history. A really quick, cute little story. So my son was about 3. I had my friends that were over, a gay couple, and one of them kissed the other. My little guy, when he was 3, came running over to me and said, "Hey, you know that Ducky just kissed Scott?" And I'm like, "Yeah, they love each other." Went back and played. That little boy's 25 years old right now. And, it's just been, the discussion is just what it is in your home. You bring the discussion in, you don't make a mystery. And so what happens is then you raise these 2 anti-racist adults that are now out in the community. And if we can continue to raise our children to understand about their biases, about culture, about other people, about the history, you can end up having interesting conversations, and you can start seeing what you taught them when they're adults. So very quickly, I want to go and just say that my son, he is his own unique person in the picture. And I never thought he was listening to me. But I did get a phone call a couple years ago that he said to me, he goes, "Mom, I know what white privilege is." And I'm like, "Oh no, what did you do, Noah? What'd you do?" Because my son can also be an idiot. So he lives on property with a lot of woods. And so him and a friend were out riding their ATV, and he had just completed his conceal and carry, but didn't submit his documents in. So they were out riding on an ATV, and a DNR stopped him. And this is where I want people to think that if there's privilege or not privilege. So my son was sitting there talking to the DNR, and the DNR noticed my son had a gun in his jacket. He went and called the sheriff, came back, asked my son for the gun. My son gave him the gun. Sheriff still hadn't showed up. He didn't have a conceal and carry. DNR couldn't unload the bullets. So he gave it back to my son. My son unloaded the bullets, gave it back to the officer. The sheriff still hadn't showed up. In that time, the DNR gave back the gun to my son and sent them on their way. So that would have been a different call if my son wasn't white. So if people don't believe that there is privilege out there, and that there is police brutality, and there's a different set of laws for white people and people of color, there certainly is. There's a cute little thing that I'm sure you guys read. My daughter sent that and posted that for Facebook, and it made me feel really good to know that she also is taking a lead, and she also actually joins me in marches and that. So if you start young, we can get a new generation. So here's some racism interrupters that I also found out there. Since you're going to be an ally, then you need to know how to start those conversations or interrupt those conversations. If you are staying silent, as I have said, white silence is violence. If you are not speaking out or questioning or asking questions or helping to make change, then you are just as complacent as a racist. So these are some racism interrupters that you can use. Ask those questions. Hopefully you can shift that person's thought process another way. So we're right at the end, and I'm a talker, and I really, really apologize. Like I said, I could talk for hours on so many different subjects because there's so much out there. But what I really want you to take away from this is that, one, use your I statements. It is not your place to speak on behalf of BIPOC communities. And do your reading about history and how the past has affected the current. Read about slavery, about Indigenous people and stolen land. Read the U.S. Constitution and learn that history, because really that's really where the core starts to where we're at right now, and the next steps of how we need to start changing policies. Be a responsible voter. Know what and who the candidate supports. If you are voting on a straight ticket, you are also a contributor to how the laws continue to remain as they are. Listen when BIPOC communities are sharing their struggles. Don't interject your own. Listening is powerful. And that is one of the quotes that I've always liked. Listening is actually powerful, and being silent and knowing someone's listening to you is very powerful. If you're in a position of implementing policies and laws, make sure they are inclusive of all people. Know who's at your table. If someone is not at your table, you make sure that those policies you're putting into place, they will make change and affect all. And then this is your role to learn and be aware. This burden does not belong on the backs of BIPOC communities. You do your own work. Everything that I have shared with you tonight has been through my own work, my own journeys, my own readings, my own tripping over my own feet. And I will not stop, no matter how old I am, to continue these actions and these works to make changes. So before I leave you here, where do you think you find yourself now on the rainbow? So did you take a step back? Did you take a step forward? What are your next steps? So your next steps are what we've talked through. Take those, take that opportunity to talk to people, to interrupt when it is a racist comment. Maybe you can shift someone's thought process. Catch yourself. Take a few minutes before you speak. Don't speak at all if it doesn't need to. Listen and own it. If you say or you find yourself doing, you just own it. Because once you start making excuses, it starts to become a part of you and it becomes on you and you're trying to shift it over. Own it and apologize very sincerely. So here are a few more quotes to end. Believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything. Colin Kaepernick, he's like, what he has to say out there and what he's done, he sacrificed his career because he believed in something. I've sacrificed a lot of so-called friends because I believe in this, and I'm not willing to make anyone else feel comfortable because of what they believe in, if it's about racism, and if they can't accept racism of where it's at and what we need to do to make change. And then John Lewis, who we lost, get in trouble, good trouble, and necessary trouble. We lost a beautiful soul there, and we need to remember about getting in there and making those changes. So I thank everybody who showed up tonight, and I hope it wasn't too much and too long, and we have a few minutes still for questions. So we're on to the questions. And back to you.
Jolie, I would love if you stop sharing your screen so we could all see your face and make sure we can put a connection between that and the wonderful words that you've spoken tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Jolie, I don't know if you can see the chat or not. I do have a question, and I know we talked a little bit about this before. I know you just highlighted it in your presentation, but can you speak a little bit more to doing the work for yourself and not expecting the BIPOC community to do the work for you?
Absolutely. So if you are thinking, okay, let's just say for an example, that you're thinking you would like to have an allyship presentation, or you would like to learn more about the history, or you would like to understand more about microaggressions, or anything that I talked about, it is in your first step that you do the research. You do the research, you put the questions together, and you look into it. And as you start to build your inner circle, and inner circle starts to look diverse, you will have people that trust you and you trust them, and they may start sharing things and helping you. But it really starts on yourself. I have been doing this by myself a lot of the way. And have I been doing it right all along? No, I have not. But it really, we have Google at our hands now. I mean, at one time I used to have to go to the library, or I used to have to, wait and find out about things. There's really no reason that we can't do research. And again, like I said, bringing in diverse your circle, have those conversations. But really, if you're looking for something, you need to take that ownership on yourself. Again, allyship is completely authentic awareness, and you do the work. I hope that answers.
Thanks, Jolie. For participants, you can raise your hand and go ahead and unmute yourself, or Heidi will allow you to, so you can ask your own questions. We do have one. How does white guilt play into allyship? Sorry, we actually have two. That's the first one.
Okay.
That's a great question. But how does white guilt play into allyship?
So that goes a lot like with the white fragility, that guilt. I feel that guilt myself when I read anything, and I think about where we're at right now. Think about the Chauvin trial right now. Think about anything that what the history has done and systems have been put in place. We have that white guilt. But what you need to do is you need to step away from that. You acknowledge it, you make yourself aware of it, but don't sit in it, and you move forward. In anything we do in our life, if we just sit in there and we don't think of ways to make something change, then that's where you'll be. But many of us share and feel that white guilt, who are white people, and you just have to move forward. We have to learn and be aware and make that change.
Thanks, Julie. The next question is, what are some of the best ways to get involved in the community and or diverse organizations? Well, Andrea, if I can say your name, I apologize if you don't want me to say it, but the STA is a great start. So we need volunteers. Jolie probably has a few others. I know, Jolie, you're involved in a lot of diverse organizations as well. So if you'd like to speak to that too.
Yeah, so I ended up finding the YWCA was one of them. There are multiple different opportunities there. I happen to volunteer right now with the resource hub where we distribute hygiene kits and food each week, and we were able to manage that through the whole COVID. We had a great system, and we worked with a lot of our diverse populations. The other thing to do too, maybe if your employment has social responsibility, is to go out there and look and see for some volunteer opportunities. The other thing, again, we have Google. We can Google and you will see things at hand. The pandemic right now makes things very hard, but community organizations with kids, they always need someone to participate and volunteer, maybe schoolwork, or there's the STEM program at the YWCA. You have to look for it. You have to think to yourself, what do I want to do? Things do not come to our fingertips. Just like if we had an Allyship 101 class, we could put that right on and we can watch it and we can learn from it. My suggestion is for you to Google and think about, what do you enjoy? What is within your community? And start to Google and look and to do the reach out. I have so enjoyed the YWCA. If you're in Minneapolis, the YMCA up north has some really new, powerful inclusion and diversity. It's not a museum, but information there. And actually, the company I work with, they participated in sponsoring that. So really, it takes you to look and to research.
Question for you, Jolie, and I'm going to plug the library. So for everybody who's Scott County local, we do have resources for the library. And if anybody is listening from the library, you please unmute yourself and maybe help me list some of the resources available at the library. But let me ask the question first. Sorry, Jolie. How can we learn more after this webinar? Like, what can people who want to learn more, who aren't going to see you for a little while because you're going on a civil rights tour, which is amazing, but how can they learn while they're waiting to learn from you again?
I know I hate, like I said, the I statements are the biggest things. You've got to think about, what is the next thing I want to look at? What do I want to read, and Google it. It's amazing how I was looking at, white supremacy, which brought me into the thinking of anti-masking and going into the NCAAP versus Alabama and understanding when the KKK brought a lawsuit against the NAACP because they were told they can't wear their masks, but now they're going to receive harassment because people are going to know who they are. But in the meantime, they can wear their masks and terrorize and murder people. So and I'm sorry to use that as an example, but what I'm saying is you get in there, you start to read, and it domino effects into learning anything. Nothing is going to be handed to you. You can buy every book, you can read every book, but you really need to do the work yourself. And until I come back again to share more, I say, take a topic each day, Google it, and see where it takes you. You know, either the Constitution, it can take you into old legal cases, but really it pick a day, pick a time, pick a word, and you can find it and research it, and then journal it. Journaling is a really good place to keep your thoughts together. And then maybe if you learn from a conversation you've had with someone, and maybe the conversation didn't start out smooth and seamless, and you were questioning and asking those questions. Well, why do you think that way? Oh, is that what, oh, you think that way because that's what you learned. Well, here's a really good idea for you to read about, and maybe that'll expand your thought process. Some people may shift and some people may not, but I think journaling is a really big thing.
Jolie, I don't see any other questions. Is there any other? First of all, let me tell everybody thank you. Everybody, if you can see my team, they are all awesome. This is not my team. We are a team, and they are fantastic. They've done tons of great work. Everyone hopefully smiling. Kelly, Heidi, Kevin, Anna, Kyla, we can't see you, Whitley, and Rich, we can't see you either, but thank you. You guys are killing it. This is just a great group of people, and I just love SDA, and I love the people that are on the SDA. And Jolie, you are in that love, so virtual hug. Thank you. For the library, we do have resources from the library. I don't know if they have the book you actually listed, Jolie, so I will actually check on that, but I do have resources, and we will attempt to add them to the thank you. If we cannot get that, you are more than welcome to connect with the library. They have people who are happy to help. So that is a resource available locally for people to look into if they want to continue the journey while they wait for Jolie to present again.
And I do have a list that I compiled. I don't know if you guys have something on your site. I will email it to you, Misty, and then you guys can post it, because all the books that I've read, websites, workshops, all of that will be on there, articles. And of course, there's many, many more, but these were some of the main ones. So maybe until you see me again. And yes, like Misty said, I am on April 7th taking a civil rights tour that I put together with my friend and I. We are flying into Memphis, Tennessee, and we are staying in Memphis for 3 days. And I am then we'll be seeing, you know, the Lorraine Motel and walking through where Ida B. Wells. I just read about Ida B. Wells, learn about a very strong Black woman, read about her. We're also then driving through Mississippi through a few spots. We're stopping in Birmingham for a night. Then we are driving to Selma. So I will be walking across Edmund Pettus Bridge. I will be, you know, visiting those sites and walking in the strength and the footsteps of all the strong fighters before us. And I will be ending it in Montgomery, Alabama, which will be connecting my Duluth, Minnesota to the National Peace and Justice Lynching Museum, which actually has the 3 men's names on a pole. It's going to be very heavy for me. It's going to be very powerful for me. And I am looking to put something together about what my experience is, but I am going to feel so much strength and power walking in some footsteps that we've all heard about through our history. So I look forward to more, but I will have that list also for Misty and the SDA team to post.
Thank you very much, Jolie. And just let me plug the next event. The next event is April 12th, and that will be with Sheriff Hennon. For those of you who are local, that is going to be the Sheriff of Scott County. Jolie, I don't remember if you're here or not, but you're welcome to join. Also, April 26th will be Chief Tate, and Jolie will be back again May 3rd. So we will have a couple events in April and one in May. Again, thanks everyone, and thank you so much, Jolie.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for having me. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jolie.
Yeah. Any feedback? I would love feedback.